Good morning, good morning, good afternoon, good day, and good evening. Now, I don't know what time of day it is for you, but for me, it's the good time of day. Again, we are back at it again today. It is another day, another dollar, something that's going to make my soul want to holler. We are back today, and we are talking about a subject that is a very serious subject. But I guess as I'm getting started in this, if you like what we're doing here, if you like the content that we are putting out, I'm gonna. Someone told me I need to make sure I start stating what it is that I'm also looking for, because as I would love to have some support here. So if you could just like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, do the whole YouTube thing. And if you're listening on audio, if you could make sure that this is one of the main streams that you or podcasts that you like to listen to, I very much appreciate that as well. With that being said, I like jumping straight into it. I don't want to make you wait for what the content is going to be or what the content might be. I want to make sure that if you came here and you want to know about how it is when you looked at the title, that the law is authorizing police to kill citizens. I'm sure that you're like, well, that's nothing new, especially as Black people here in the United States. That is nothing new. And they set precedent a lot of time by looking at what they also allow for it to happen to white people. So they allow it to happen both with Black people and with white people. In this particular case that we're going to be talking about, because this is case law that's been set, and this is something that's been set in the 11th Circuit, and it just recently came to my attention. And I apologize, I am a day late and a dollar short on this, but this is law that it's really disturbing. And granted, the individual that's involved, the person who this happened to, is a white individual, but if you extract this out and you extrapolate this out, this still comes down to a series or a situation where we have two sets of laws in this country, one that applies to the citizenry and the other that applies to the police. And I fundamentally have an issue with this. And it boils down to qualified immunity for the police officers, which in many cases, and you can argue it one way or the other for all of the attorneys out there. I'm sure that those of you who are practicing criminal law, and in this case is dealing actually with civil law on a lawsuit that came about dealing with qualified immunity for a police officer in Georgia. And it's a really sad turn of events, because while each state is a little different, in each state how they interpret and carry out laws is going to be slightly different. This is one where you're looking at it, and it is just a very, very sad state of affairs that they allow this, and specifically for police officers, because I'm going to get into a little more on the tail end of this, but I want to make sure that I touch on it right now as we're getting started, that there's two sets of laws in this country. There's what's allowed for the citizenry as far as what we are allowed to do. So one of the things that becomes very relevant in what we're talking about right now, and it sets precedent, is that in almost any place that you go here in the United States, any country, I mean, any state that you're in within this country, a legal mistake is normally not allowed as a defense. And there are some exceptions. There's always exceptions within the law, but as a general rule, a legal mistake is not uh, something that you can use as a reason or as a defense for why it is that you did something. Okay, so for example, if you do something that's wrong and it's against the law, and that law is published and everybody knows what the law is, and we've all had an opportunity to understand what that law is, you are not then able to go in and to state that, okay, well, I didn't know about it. I didn't realize that was against the law. I apologize for my mistake. Is there any way, excuse me, is there any way that we can do away with this and move on as if this never happened? And the reality is, for all of us as U.S. citizens, the answer to that is no. If you are just a normal citizen of the United States, the answer to whether or not you can make a legal mistake, something you legitimately did not know was against the law, and to use that as a defense to say that, hey, I did not know this was illegal, I did not know that this went against the law, the answer for you is no. However, for police, The individuals whose responsibility and whose job it is to uphold the law, they're held to a different standard. Okay. Police are held to the standard where they can have a legal mistake. And they'll start to parse it as, is it really a legal mistake, or is it a factual, a mistake of fact, or a mistake of law, right? That's where they start tumbling with it, and going on with it. However, regardless of where you fall in on that spectrum, it all falls up under qualified immunity. And we're going to go in depth, because we're going to look at this opinion by the court and how this definitively impacts the citizenry, where they pretty much stated that, hey, it's okay for the police to kill a citizen at their home. This is perfectly okay. You can sneak up on there. You don't need to announce yourself, like we talked about with no knock warrants. And this is not even a no knock warrant situation. This is something where the law has stated that it is okay for police officers to kill citizens of the United States at their own homes. And that might sound harsh, or that's a really harsh take on this circuit court opinion, but that's essentially what they've done. They have okayed it again. I'm not even gonna say that they just okayed it. They've just okayed it again to kill citizens, and to make it so that it is legally permissible, and the police get the protection, they get the shield, they get to put it on, that they have qualified immunity in cases like this. And you know what? Let's just hop right into it. I could spend a lot of time talking about what's qualified immunity and how that happens, or whatnot. But let's look and see exactly what it is that we're dealing with here. And I've already dropped the link to the chat, or it's in the chat right now. So if you disagree with me, or you feel that I'm off on this, and that you would like to come in and offer an opposing view, or if you have any view that you want to offer up, by all means, click the link that's in the chat right now, that I dropped down there, and you can come on up and we can talk about this. But right now, I want to get into what this decision is. What is it that the 11th Circuit held? And again, I apologize for being a little late to the barbecue on this one, so to speak. But let's take a look and see exactly what it is that the 11th Circuit held. And let me share my screen with you here. And this is an opinion that came out of the 11th Circuit, which this actually happened in Georgia. The plaintiff, the person who was suing, again, this is a civil case. It was her husband was killed by the police at his home. And you know, it's better to hear it in their words, because the nice part about situations where this goes up to the Court of Appeals, and this is what they called a summary judgment case. And what that basically means is the police basically said, well, we're not even liable. Why are we talking about this? We have qualified immunity here. We don't need to hear about any of the facts of the case, or the merits of the case, or why it is they're bringing this case to sue us. We have qualified immunity. Okay, so there was a mistake made. So what? Somebody lost their life. So what? We killed another citizen at their home. Right now, we went in there and we killed him. Okay, that happened. It's sad. It's boo-hoo. Let's cry. It's okay. It happens, right? It's one of those situations where they say, but we have qualified immunity. We can make a mistake like this, and you guys say, and here the court says we're going to look at it, because the case comes to them. They have to look at the case, since it is a summary judgment, something that the court didn't. They looked at it. They said, you're right. You get qualified immunity. Toss the case out. The person who's bringing the case said, whoa, 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 whoa. How is it they get qualified immunity? We were at home, minding our own business. The police came up based off a call from someone else, didn't announce themselves, didn't say who they were. We came out to investigate, and one of the individuals, the husband in this case, got shot. So let's take a look at this. That way, it's looking, because they're going to look at it and they're going to say, well, we're going to take it, we're going to assume that everything that you said is true, that the story that you're giving us is true. We're going to just assume that what you're telling us right now, this is true. And it says the plaintiffs are Sharon and David Powell, and the person who's the defendant is Mr. Snook. or let's say so. Here you have a situation here where one of the parties uh, is dead, and we're going to see how that happened and how it is that the police allowed this individual, or not allowed, how the police killed this individual, and the courts upheld it and said, yeah, that's allowed, that's okay, justifiable killing. That is a lawful and legal killing. That is something that we definitely are okay with, is looking at it from that perspective, that this is a legal killing. And here we're looking at it. It says so. It starts off. It talks about this is something that was uh, a deadly force violation of the 14th under the Fourth Amendment, and it said, and the synopsis is that in Henry County, Georgia, Police Sergeant Patrick Snook, who was at the wrong house because of imprecise dispatch directions, shot and killed William David Powell, who was innocent of any crime and standing in his driveway. He was holding a pistol because he and his wife thought they heard a prowler. Who was the prowler? According to where we're going to go through, the prowler that they thought they heard was actually the police in their driveway coming to investigate a call that they received from dispatch, or from 911 in this case. So the police, no lights, no sirens, pull up to this person's home. And let me give it to you again in their own words, right? Because this is one where, if you're listening to it or you're looking at it, you go, that sounds crazy. That cannot be the case, that the police would go to someone's home, see that they and not even announce themselves, and kill the homeowner, and just chalk it up, too bad, so sad, sorry that happened to you, things like this happen. And yet that's exactly what happened here, right? So the homeowner in this situation comes in and realizes that they have a situation that they could have a prowler outside, and because of said possibility of a prowler outside, they go outside to go investigate, right? So they want to know whether or not there's a prowler outside or not. They get there, and this is what happens. So Sharon Powell, David's wife, bought a claim. Okay, so she's saying that there was excessive force, and telling you that this case is on appeal. The qualified immunity issue before us is a familiar one of whether clearly established law puts Snook, who's a police officer, on notice that firing the shots he did violated David Powell's constitutional rights. So if a police officer goes up to your home, does not announce themselves, has no lights on, that identifies themselves as police officers, comes up to the home with a weapon drawn, assuming that there's a crime happening, they're okay to make that mistake, and it's assumed to be reasonable. Here, and qualified immunity will apply. So let's take a look at this. Summary judgment, because again, this came to them on summary judgment, and again, so we state the facts in this opinion for the purpose of reviewing the ruling, because it's a summary judgment. In other words, the court didn't even hear the case when they was down there in the lower court. And here's the facts, and this is, it says, about 5 minutes before midnight on June 7th, 2016, and they're just assuming that these facts are accurate, based on assuming in the light that the person who's bringing the suit against them, since it was a summary judgment, since the court didn't hear it, we're just going to assume that what they're saying is true. Everything that they're alleging, all of the stuff that they're stating, all of it is true. We're just going to assume it's true. Okay. So this is what we're dealing with. It says, so about 5 minutes before midnight on June 7th, 2016, a Henry County 911 operator spoke to a caller who reported hearing a woman screams and 3 gunshots. The caller gave her address as 739 Swan Lake Road and said the noises were coming from a few houses down. She also said that she had called 911 on an earlier occasion because they were fighting so bad, right? The operator searched the 911 call history for 736 Swan Lake, but did not find a record of that earlier call, right? So The caller said that her mother had heard the woman scream, "Help me, please," and then nothing else. After that, the operator asked the caller for the nearest intersecting street. She answered Fairview Road and added that the screaming and gunshots had come from the second or third house past hers towards Fairview. In the call report, the operator noted that Fairview was a cross street, but did not include that the caller had told her about the screaming and gunshots having come from the direction of that street. The operator asked the follow-up question: "If I'm looking at your house, where exactly would their house be?" Once again, the caller said that it was a couple houses down on the right toward Fairview Road. But the operator wrote in her report only that if the person were looking at the caller's house, that the noises came from 2 or possibly 3 houses down to the right. She omitted the caller's more helpful and less vague direction about the noises being toward Fairview. That's where the seeds of tragedy were sown. I'm going to disagree with the court. The seeds of tragedy were not sown at this point. We're going to get into where the seeds of tragedy actually were sown and what it has. In other words, where the actual issue came up. They're saying that they got bad information from the 911 caller, which is accurate. If we're taking the story as it is, I'm going to agree. You got some bad information from the 911 dispatcher, and that the information that you're actually looking for right now should not be you're going to have to probably request more definitive information once you're on the scene. And ironically, let's instead of me getting into that, let's get in here and go a little further in. Let's get a little deeper into it, and let's see exactly what else happened according to the based on the court's opinion on what the actual facts are in this case. It says, based on the operator's report, a 911 dispatcher sent police officers to 736 Swan Lake, explaining that if they were looking at this location, the person who called, is 2 houses down on the right, maybe 3 houses. Officer Snook, who was in charge of the Uniform Patrol Division that shift. I apologize for my words are messing up right now, but responded to the call with officers Matthew Davis and Ashley Ramsey. On the way to Swan Lake, Snook asked dispatch if he can find the address for the place where the disturbance had actually occurred. So now he's calling in for more information, right? So they're saying it was sown because they gave less definitive information. He's calling now for better information. So a 911 call center supervisor who had replaced the earlier dispatcher during the midnight shift change replied that dispatch thought it was either 690 or 634. The Pauls lived at 690 Swan Lake. The 3 officers who all wore police uniforms parked their cars along the roadway with their blue lights off. With their blue lights off. So the officers are there. The officers come up. They're there. They're anticipating, because it sounded like there might have been a situation where there was a shooting. So they're coming in cautious, but they're coming in hot. And again, this goes to officers get a different quality or standard in upholding the law that the rest of us definitely do not. And this standard that they get, that's going to include qualified immunity, as we're going to talk about a little bit here, is one where you, as a citizen, cannot say that you didn't know what the law was and use that as a defense for yourself in court. But an officer gets qualified immunity. They don't have to actually know what the law is, even though it's their job to enforce the law, right? It is their responsibility, their job, to enforce the law. How are you going to enforce something that you don't know about? But let's continue. Let's get back to what we're talking about here. All right. So when the supervisor dialed the number that had originally called 911, the original caller's mother answered, right? So now they didn't just call the 911 operator. Now they called the individual who made the 911 call. They recognize they're in a situation. They want to know more information. They came up with their lights off. They want to make sure they're in the right location. So now they don't just call the 911 supervisor, which they're saying that's because the earlier dispatcher made a mistake in describing the house, that's where the seeds for this issue arose. And I vehemently disagree with the court at this point. The court, their ruling stands, obviously, but I disagree with the opinion that that's where the issue arose, because now they have called in not once but twice. Once to the subsequent dispatcher who probably had bad notes, but then they also called the individual who made the call initially, right? And so now we're talking to the person who made the call. And the person who made the call at this point, it says when the supervisor dialed the number that originally called, the caller's mother answered and agreed with the supervisor that the sounds had come from the right, south of the caller's location going towards Gardner Road. From the perspective of a person standing on Swan Lake Road and looking at house 736, the Powell's house is to the right and toward Gardner Road. So they get wrong information after calling in and seeing exactly what's going on here. Okay, so now it says, based on the 911 dispatch information, the officers approached the Powell's house, which could not be seen from the road because of its long driveway. As the officers, no blue lights, right? They don't have the blue and reds going in their uniform, no announcing that they're the police coming down here. It says, as the officers walk down the long driveway, there are no lights on inside or outside the house. It was very dark. Why? Why would the house be very dark when the officer, it says, because they were going to a call involving domestic violence with shots fired, the officers approached cautiously, trying to avoid being targets for a shooter. Reasonable. You don't want to be targets for a shooter. Also, you could announce yourself as police once you get there. But let's continue on. It says Snook carried a rifle because of the dangerous circumstances and in case long-range fire was necessary. So they're walking down to the home that has a long driveway carrying a rifle. Now, these are individuals that are supposed to be there trying to de-escalate a situation of domestic violence, and they're there evidently to escalate a situation, hopefully protecting someone in their minds by killing someone else. They're no longer even there with handguns. They are there with assault rifles, and this is according to what it is that they're everybody's agreeing this is what happened. Okay, or the court's going to say that this is what happened. I'm not going to say everybody's agreeing, but this is what the court, they're taking it in the light most favorable to the person who's bringing the appeal to the court to say that, hey, the lower court was wrong. This is what actually happened. And the court is saying, okay, great. Let's listen to this. We're going to assume that everything that you're saying is right. Okay. So he carried a rifle because of the dangerous circumstances and the long range fire was necessary. So you're going up to a home with a long driveway. You get up there with a rifle intending to do some kind of damage. It says there were 2 trucks at the house, which the supervisor told Snook were registered to the Powells. So evidently they had ran the plates. They seen that the information came back to the Powells. A couple in their 60s. So they're responding to a domestic violence situation. They're all anxious. They're not there for de-escalation or to try and see what's going on. They're there on the attack. For a couple in their 60s. The supervisor also told Snook that the previous 911 calls for the Powell's house had involved an alarm and an ambulance. So there's been previous 911s to this home for this couple in their 60s that involved an ambulance and an alarm, right? So maybe they had domestic violence before. It says Snook knew from experience that an alarm or ambulance calls sometimes grew out of domestic violence incidents. But he also knew because the supervisor had told him that police had not been dispatched to the Powell's house before for a domestic violence incident. They're walking up, their blood pressure is high. They just left the academy, or in this case, he's been there for a while, so they've been on the job for a while, and their viewpoint of citizens in this country is that they are an occupying force and that these are the enemies. It's not to protect and serve. They are there primarily to police and to keep everybody in line. 60-year-old couple that lives here. The vehicles are registered to the 60-year-old couple. They've been calling back and forth between 911, dispatch, the person who called the 911 for the dispatch, the person that actually said it, talked to their mother since they didn't get the actual individual online or on the phone to talk to. And they're getting information that there was some kind of domestic violence that they heard about. No other proof of this domestic violence, but they're going in hot with rifles drawn, walking down a home, the driveway to a home that sits far back on the lot. This is where we're at right now. Let's continue. And they know also that there's been ambulance and 911 calls there for an alarms that gone off. So evidently this is a home where they have a security alarm. Evidently this is a home where they has a couple in their 60s. I'm sure that they probably knew that ambulance call wasn't for domestic violence, and it's probably because you have an older couple or an older individual living at that home, as I have in my neighborhood. Wherever we see the ambulance coming in, everybody knows that there's one home on the block, and now the husband has recently passed, who had some health complications, right? And normally when you see it, you know exactly what's coming in on your block, and you know where the incidents are coming from. Anyway, long story short, let's continue. Snook sent Ramsey to cover the back of the house, while he and David stayed out front. Snook was close to the driveway area. He took his flashlight to look in the windows, but he didn't see any damage or lights on inside the house and didn't hear any screaming. Sharon Powell, I wonder why it is the lights are off at this home, no screaming, nothing coming out. Maybe there's a person who's doing DV in there and they're assuming the worst walking up to this door. It says Sharon Powell, who was inside. So this is the person who's bringing the suit. Her and her husband, who was inside, didn't hear any knocks on her door, or rings of her doorbell, but she did hear her dogs barking, which had awakened her and David. So here you have a couple in their 60s at home. Lights are off because they're sleeping. So now we know that this is something that happened at a time of day where they were in bed sleeping when the police officers came up down their driveway, assault rifles drawn, ready for some kind of not just domestic violence, but something in where they're going to be accosted and shot themselves, with this mindset that they're in Fallujah or some other place, as opposed to being here to protect and serve the citizenry here. That every DV call they're going to go on, or the majority of the DV calls that they're going to go on, or any DV call that they're going to go on, is going to result in a loss of life or shootings coming on out. Let's continue. So what did they do? It says the two of them got out of bed but did not check their front door. Instead, David went to the laundry room door, looked out the window, and told Sharon that he saw someone outside. So here they're coming down the driveway with assault rifles. She thinks that they've heard, the dogs are barking. They hear somebody outside. Here's a homeowner at home, wakes her husband up. Somebody's outside, David. David. Somebody's outside. I hear some people. It sounds like somebody's coming. David. And as a husband, as a man, he gets up and goes and he takes a look. He looks outside the window, doesn't check the door, but he looks outside the window because no one's knocked. No one's rung the bell, but he hears something outside. And so here, what does he do? It says he went to his closet, put on his pants, and got his pistol. He then walked through the kitchen door into an attached garage and pushed the button that caused the garage door to begin opening and the garage light to come on. All the other house lights are still off. So here you are, you're the officers. You've walked down to this home, assault rifles drawn. You don't hear anything. You see nothing. This is at a time when most people are sleeping. You've been called out on a domestic violence call. And you're, according to the papers, you're scared for your life at a house that you know the couple that's inside, the vehicles that are there belong to them, that are out in the driveway, that belong to a 60-year-old couple inside their home. law-abiding couple in their home at this time. It says it takes the garage door about 8.8 seconds to open. So now you're sitting there, one at the front, one at the back, at the very least, according to this report. And you hear no other lights, but you can hear the garage door coming open. Could you imagine that sound? The garage door coming open. And the light comes on from the garage. It says after walking, so now David walked onto his driveway. It says when the door had fully opened, David walked out into the driveway holding the loaded pistol in his right hand. He walked 10 to 15 steps at a normal pace, which took about 9 seconds. He stopped, turned, and faced the walkway leading up to his front door, which is where Officer Snook was positioned in the dark. When David Powell stopped walking, he was standing straight up, and his arms were pointed straight down with a pistol in his right hand. So the officer sitting there in the dark at the door, hears the noise, sees a homeowner coming around from the garage, says not word one does he say. Let's continue. Sharon Powell had followed David onto the driveway and stood 4 or 5 feet behind him. So you have an officer at the front, you have an officer at the back. They hear the garage door come open. The couple comes out the garage door. They're looking for somebody that looks like a prowler, walks up to the front door. Says she was standing on his right side, focused on him, watching him. She heard no noise or voice, either while the garage door was opening or after she and her husband went outside. She specifically did not hear anyone identify themselves as police. It was perfectly quiet. So now you have homeowners believing they have a burglar at their front door. The police vehicles are out on the street. They didn't even come down. No lights on. No indication that there's police there at their door, front or back. The police are getting all kinds of indications, have a better idea of what's going on. Up until this point, 9 seconds for the garage door to open, according to the account that we're getting right now. Still no word, right? From inside that home, from the police. They're staying quiet, sitting there with assault rifles, waiting, hoping, praying for the opportunity to use these new toys or the toys that they have to put them in action. This is the type of training these police officers have. Sharon Powell had a sense that David was looking at someone. He started to raise his arm, his right arm, the one holding the pistol, and got the pistol hip high. While David was doing that, Snook went down on one knee to make himself a smaller target and rapidly fired 3 shots with his rifle. I'm sure they had the setting, the triple shot setting. He fired 3 shots with his rifle. Sharon testifies that only a very short time, like 1 second, it felt like, passed between when David started to raise his gun and when Snook began firing. After Snook fired, David dropped to the ground. Sharon screamed, ran into the house, locked the door, and called 911. The officers on the scene aided David and called for an ambulance that took him to the hospital. He died the next day. Later on, I'll bring it up, and I say you'll see it later, but it took him approximately 19 seconds. Approximately 19 seconds is how long it took for them to do it. How long is 19 seconds? How long is that? Let's time this. That is 19 seconds. Okay, so that's the amount of time. So there was 9 seconds for the garage door to open. Took about 10 seconds, because they said 10 to 15 paces, and then later on in the opinion, it's going to talk about the fact that it took about 10 seconds for them to get out from the garage to the front door. 19 seconds, and the police in that time frame said nothing. No lights on, no nothing. Let's see. Gospel news. They always scared for their life. That's what they always say. You are exactly right. They're scared for their life. They create the situation for them to be scared for their life, and then they come back and they say they're scared for their life. It says, what state was this, and when did this happen? This happened in Georgia. I have has a and this is the opinion from the court that I'm reading. This is so this happened back in 2016. This actually, and then it has a so the court dismissed it based on qualified immunity. So here's the facts. And the court says, okay, there's qualified immunity in this case. It's not that the cop should have known any better, because that's what qualified immunity. There's no law, nothing that says it has a obviously that the court that the cops, the police officers should have known any better. That's what we're dealing with here. And then so once they lost that one and they lost for summary judgment based off qualified immunity, it then went up to the Court of Appeals. And here on February 8th of this year, the Court of Appeals just rendered this opinion that we're looking at right now. This is from the Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. The case happened in Georgia. That's what's going on here, right? So, and they're looking at it from the standpoint that obviously, they did something wrong, right? That's what we're getting there at Gospel News. It says, I see the state. Yeah. So like these, like the no, yeah, this is even worse than a no-knock warrant. Right? This is worse than a no-knock warrant. Someone calls a 911, says that I think that there's a problem at my neighbor's home. Sounds like domestic violence. The police go down and they go to investigate. They don't don't announce themselves, no lights, no red or blue lights, because they thought there was a gunshot. So they took the time to get down there. They call the 911 dispatcher. They call the person who actually made the 911 dispatch. They call the person who actually called for 911. Speak to the people to get more information. Find out the vehicles belong in the driveway to a couple in their 60s. Right? These are the facts of the case. And there's nothing here that says that there is prior legal precedent that will make this so the police should be put on notice and know that this type of behavior is wrong. Here it is, they're scared for their life is what they're saying, right? And it took, again, once we get down to it, I'll point it out later on, but 19 seconds. Let's do that again. Think about it. Starting right now, I'm getting ready to start. When I say I'm gonna have set an alarm or set a timer real fast. Here's how long the police had from sitting at the door with their assault rifle. So they're assuming that they needed an assault rifle just in case they needed long range fire. And they get all the way down the driveway to the front door. So now long range fire is no longer necessary. They get to the front door. They never ring the doorbell. They never knock. All the lights in the house are off. All of a sudden, if you're from the police and you're looking at it from the police standpoint, okay, so all the lights in the house are now off, and then you hear the garage door open. You're the police. You don't know what's going on. You stay down in the dark. Make sure that you cut a narrow, smaller profile. Get down on one knee. Draw down on the individual coming towards you, who's the homeowner. And from the time you hear that garage door opening to the point when you make the shot, this is how much time lapsed. That's how much time the police had from the time they heard the garage door open, or from the time that garage door opened, to the time he shot the homeowner, Mr. Powell. And the court says, hey, there's no current law on the books that would make the police, who have a job to uphold the law, to enforce the law, specifically on us as citizens. They don't need to know that that was wrong. There's no law on the books that specifically tells them that with that conduct that they engaged in is wrong. Nothing. There's no reason for them to understand that what they're doing there in that situation is a wrong deal. Let's continue on, because the procedural history. So it goes as the court then gives you the procedural history of what happened here. And I'm not reading the entire thing, but the opinion is online, and you can definitely pull this opinion down. You don't need a law degree or anything like that in order to do it, but you can pull this opinion down and you can see exactly what it is that the court ruled in the 11th Circuit. This is the actual court's filing. You can pull the PDF and you can read this. It's only 23 pages, and they go through the history or what actually happened, and so now they're saying, okay, so based off of what on what the Powells are asking for, they're saying that, hey, they committed negligence. They should have known that what they did was a violation of the Fourth Amendment's excessive force claim, right? And so then Snook says, hey, there's no way for me to know that what I did was a violation of the excessive force up under the Fourth Amendment. I shouldn't know that. How? I'm just a police officer who's supposed to enforce the law. How am I supposed to know what's a violation of? There's no specific law in the book that actually tells me what is a violation of the Fourth Amendment's excessive use claim. So what? 19 seconds passed from the time that I walked down there with my assault rifle, with my blood. I can hear my heart beating in my ears. I am sitting there making sure that right about now I'm going to this door, and I got my partner going to the back. We have no lights on at this point. We haven't announced ourselves as police, and yet and still right now I am scared for my life because this 60-year-old couple that we've made several phone calls to, dispatch, several phone calls to the people who called in for the 911 call. We've made several phone calls to these individuals, and in all that time, I've not got the warm and fuzzy yet that what I'm dealing with is not a domestic violence claim, and that I'm at the wrong house. Let's say that I don't even know that I'm at the wrong house, but even if I haven't even knocked on the door, I haven't made a call, I haven't rung the bell, nothing. And all the lights are off because it's at the time of day when people are in their beds sleeping. The couple, the Powells, at home, hear the dog start barking, wakes them up from sleep. The wife, Mrs. Powell, David, can you please wake up? I hear something outside. I think somebody's coming. And the husband gets up. The husband goes and looks outside, doesn't go to the door, but he looks outside, and from where evidently his wife probably told him that she heard something outside. I think it's coming by the driveway. He looks outside. He sees nothing. Oh, correction. It looks like he sees someone out there now. Goes, puts his pants on, gets his gun, walks outside to check, comes out to the front to see his front door, and there's a silhouetted person kneeled down with an assault rifle at his front door pointed at him. And what does David do? He begins to raise his gun, and he gets triple tapped and dies at his home on that scene as a law-abiding citizen who did nothing besides to come outside and check on whether or not there was a prowler at his front door. Let's see. The no-knock warrant is a license to kill instinctively. If someone breaks into your house, you're going to move to protect yourself. That's what happened with Amir. But in this case, they didn't even need a no-knock warrant. They didn't knock. They did nothing. No announcements at all. And this is not even black people. This is white people this time. This is a white person this happened to, but this is precedent that's being set by the 11th Circuit. So if you're down there in that Florida, Georgia area, this is now established law that it's okay for the police to shoot you at your home without ever having to announce that they're the police. To come up dark, no lights on. They might get their assault rifles out. They're scared for their lives. They're going to come down there. They're going to check to make sure the information they have. They need to make sure it's a 60-year-old couple. Okay, have there ever been a 911 call here before? There have been ambulances and for an alarm for a 60-year-old couple. Yes, but there's been domestic violence here before, though, right? No. There's never been domestic violence here before. Are you sure, dispatch? Are you sure there's never been domestic violence here before? Maybe this is the first time. Maybe those ambulances that came here before, maybe that was a false pretext and the wife didn't want to press charges for a domestic violence situation. That's not what happened. So in order for Mrs. Powell's claim for a violation of the rights to succeed and get over the hurdle of qualified immunity that police are held to, right? And I'm going to back up a little bit here because I'm going to say that I think that police should be held to a higher and not a lower standard. I'm going to say that again. Police need to be held to a higher and not a lower standard. They often deal with it as if they're in Fallujah or someplace else, or getting ready to go in there and go fight in Russia or fight the China, whatever. They're as a not policing the citizenry. As a matter of fact, the military, anytime you deal with them, if you're in the military, they're held to a higher and not a lower standard. What do I mean by that? How is it that the military is held to a higher standard and not a lower standard? The military, if you're in the military, you're held to the standard of everything that everybody else is held to. So you're held to whatever the federal law is, right? Because you're a citizen of the U.S. Whatever state that you're stationed in, you're held to whatever the laws are in that state. Wherever your home state is at, wherever your home state is, you're held to the laws of that state as well. So if you don't want to be, as they declare your state of residence as being the state that you're stationed in, you can declare that as some other state. And that's what a lot of time, as a lot of military people do. So you're held to possibly 3. And in addition to that, the kicker is that there's something that the military specifically, regardless of the branch that you're in, that you're held to. And it's called the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the UCMJ. And these are laws on top of the laws that all the normal, everyday citizens of this country are held to. And those laws are not less strict for the military. Those laws are more strict for the military. So if you're a military personnel, you have federal law, you have state law, you might have 2 state laws, and you have the Uniform Code of Military Justice that you're being held to. You're being held to a higher standard of law than what everyone else is. And police are not. Police get a lower standard. If you're a citizen in this country and you're having an issue, here's what you get to do. You go to court and you say, hey, I didn't know that was against the law. They'll laugh at you. Especially if the law is established and the law has been published, there's no excuse. You can't use that as a defense. Who do you think you are? You should have known that was ignorance of the law is no excuse for breaking it, right? You cannot use a legal mistake as a defense. But the police can. I didn't know that was against the law to shoot a homeowner in his driveway as he's coming out to check while I'm sitting down, drawing down on him with an assault rifle pointed at him, and I put 3 in his chest just before I put 3 in his chest. That's the standard that they're held to. And they get qualified immunity because they can't, they're tasked with enforcing the law, but they can't. Why would you take someone who's tasked with enforcing the law and then require them to actually know what the law is? I mean, that's just silly, right? That's stupid. Police being required to know what the law is that they're enforcing? Come on. Why would you hold somebody to that standard? That's crazy. Now, I say, as a matter of fact, one of the other things that it talks about here, it gives the standard that came down from the U.S. Supreme Court. In this case, is Tennessee versus Gardner, when it gives the standard for qualified immunity, right? And there's a three-part test for qualified immunity uh, that the court held in this case of Tennessee versus Gardner. So in the Gardner case, one of the things that she's alleging is that the police were required to give a warning, and they're saying, not really. There's situations when they're not required to, and they're in the field, so we're not going to second guess what they were doing, walking up to a home, taking 19 seconds once they got there, and then shooting the homeowner that they just woke up, who came outside to check and see if there was a burglar, that we never announced ourselves, no lights on, nothing. We're just sitting there in the dark. They should have turned their own lights on. So what? They turned on the garage light that they came out of. So what? They should have turned on the lights to see if we were the police. That's their fault that he got shot. It's not the police's fault, right? The police they're just doing their job. They're there to to protect and serve. How were they supposed to know that this wasn't actually a domestic violence? So what? They called dispatch. So what? They got additional information. So what? They're now saying that the information they got is not matching what it is that they're seeing on the ground. So what? So and what? Right? Who cares? So here it says she asserts that a law recognizes the mere presence of a firearm isn't enough to warrant the use of deadly force, and that the reasonableness of any force depends on whether the suspect possesses a threat or serious physical harm, with an emphasis on the level and immediacy of the threat. She also asserted that since Gardner, the law has been abundantly clear that officers should issue a warning unless it is not feasible to do so using deadly force, and argued that Snook had ample opportunity, at least 17.8 seconds, to identify himself and give a proper warning before deadly force is used. Later on, it says 19, but let's just even take that 17.8 seconds. Let's just make it 17 seconds, because that would be 19 if you're rounding it up, but at least 17.8 seconds. From the amount of time that you heard the garage door opening and you hear someone coming down their driveway from the garage door, that's obviously the homeowner. And at no time do you make the effort to announce that you're the police and that you're there legally and that you're checking there for a domestic violence call. Morally corrupt persons policing you. How would you expect it to come out? You can write laws all you want, and they don't respect God, they're not going to respect life. I agree with you there, Gospel News. I would take it a step further and say that it's not that the laws are that the laws are bad. It's the enforcement of the law. This is one of those issues where you see a law on the books and they bend themselves over backwards to enforce that law or to interpret that law in a way that takes responsibility away from the police and puts it on the citizen. Right? Because that's what happens with qualified immunity. The moment you sue the police and say, hey, what you did was wrong and against the law, the police says we have qualified immunity. Now the burden is no longer on them, right? To say that now the burden's on you to show that they should have known better, that there's some kind of law that specifically speaks to the instances of this particular case. Because that's where it starts. That's where it goes off the rails. If I were to read this in its entirety, and I'm not going to sit here and do that to you again, the case is up. I said you guys can go in there and take a look at it, because the court, and when they're looking at it, they use a level of reasoning, and they explain the reasoning that they used. Right? They explain the logic that they use, the analysis that they use in order to come to the decision that they came to. And as you're reading this decision, and as you're reading the logic, you can see the mental gymnastics and the hoops they're jumping through to make sure that they uphold this principle of qualified immunity for police officers. This lower bar, this lower standard that police who are required to enforce the law are held to, while we as citizens are held to a higher standard. Think of how sick that is. The citizenry is held to a standard that's up here, the police who are responsible for enforcing and executing the laws, theirs is down here. That's what they're responsible for. So look, I apologize for that noise there as I leaned in too hard on that one. Um, so this is them looking at why the court granted summary judgment. It says the officer in Gardner could not reasonably have believed the suspect posed a threat because the person was running away from them when they got shot. They go through and they talk about all the situations and how Gardner was there. It says the court also distinguished or separated from Lundgren v. McDaniels, where the officer did not have any advance report that a burglary suspect was armed, and there was not apparently much less actually threatened with a weapon. Here they're saying there is a weapon, there is a gun. And I wonder why there's a weapon or a gun coming from a homeowner walking outside after being awakened from their home and walking out of their garage. Why would that happen? Could you have de-escalated that situation by announcing that you're the police? Is that possible? Is it possible that as a police officer yourself, that you're sitting there, that you're there, the purpose of you being there to protect and serve, part of it is to de-escalate tense situations. Police are not taught to de-escalate a situation. You look at how they go about their job. They go in and they meet in the morning before they go out on their beats, and they get told to come back home, make sure you come home safe because it's dangerous out there, right? And I'm not saying that there's not dangerous situations that can occur. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that when you go in there with the understanding or the preconceived notions, and the type of training you get is not necessarily training that's geared towards de-escalating, but how to use weapons, how to get geared up for SWAT, how to sit there and use these assault rifles, these shotguns, the difference between cover and concealment. You're militarizing that force. You get an occupying force here as opposed to policing. What's the difference? What's the difference between policing and the military? Well, policing comes in and they're going to ask questions. They're going to try and resolve a situation. They're going to try and de-escalate the situation and see if what they need to do for the citizenry of that community. Not view all citizens as hostile, all calls as hostile, with a reason to go in there white hot, ready to take life. That's what they're doing at this point. They're going in white hot. They're anticipating, they're expecting, they want to take a life. They want to use the toys. They want to use the training they've been given. They haven't been given training on de-escalation. Who wants to use that? I don't even know what that is. But I have been taught how to use an assault rifle. I have been taught tactical situations and how to get in and where the dangers are and how I might be at danger or at risk if I do announce myself, as opposed to that it should be by default that I announce myself, right? That if I go up to a door and it's at night, at a time when most people are sleeping, and I know after I've walked up and we've run the place and we know that the two vehicles in the yard belong to a 60-year-old couple, there's a pretty good chance that there's not going to be gunshots fired and that they were going to respect the authority of the law. A couple in their 60s, most of them, that's what has all of my dealings on the bad side in the court system, most couples or most individuals in their 60s are pretty law abiding. But I'm sure that there is the exception. And if you're going into every single time anticipating that exception, you're just anticipating there to be a situation where there's going to be a loss of life. You're anticipating and you're hoping for, in many ways, loss of life. What do you have down here, Gospel News? It's LOL. So you expect the wicked to watch over? No, I don't. What I am expecting is that as we talk about this, that we can start to identify what are the tactics that are being used, right? How are they playing the game, right? Because a lot of times what happens is you'll hear people from a legal or political standpoint, and they start talking about things like Uh, well, the laws are facially neutral. The law has a you guys are acting like uh, this racism is built into the system, and you're talking about systemic racism. How these laws are enforced, how they're interpreted. Here you have a situation wherein a circuit court looks at a law and says, we're going to interpret this law in a way that we're going to hold the police again to a lower standard than most citizens are held to. And not only we're going to hold them to a lower standard, we're going to okay, because this is not even this police officer is not in danger of going to jail for this. The wife bought a civil suit, a tort of negligence against this police officer for killing her husband at her home. And the court says, yeah, they got qualified immunity. You can't sue them for money either. It says we need the police, but they have to be moral, or else it's going to run amok as it is. I agree with you, Gospel News. I'm not advocating for no police. You know what? Hold on. Let me do it this way. Actually, no. Wrong button. If you're listening to this sound right now, I'm going to be giving you guys a controversial take. This is time for a controversial take. This is the time now where you, as the audience, if you're listening to it and you just want to sit there and you want to get a soundbite, this is soundbite time. Soundbite time, soundbite time, soundbite time, soundbite time. I'm not with defunding the police. What I will say instead of defund the police, I am all for disbanding the police. And that ends the controversial soundbite take that you can take from this. Now, let me give you the context behind this. I say, so that was a controversial take. Here's the soundbite. The issue with the police is not necessarily the funding. The issue with the police is not that I want to see no police. The issue that I would like to see addressed is the CBA, or the collective bargaining agreements that police get between them and the communities that they service. So when a police force is stood up, there's a collective bargaining agreement that normally goes in place, and it prevents the city council or the municipality from actually affecting any real change, and even the courts themselves from doing so, because a lot of that stuff is not outlined in the CBA, and they're very well unionized. Right? If it were up to me, I would have it so that they go in there, they make a decision, they look at it, they decide on what it is they want the police force to look like. They come into the next meeting, they pass a resolution to disband the police as they currently are, to include the CBA. Or the collective bargaining agreement. And after you do that, then immediately afterwards, pass another resolution to stand up a new police department in the same meeting with a new police chief without that current CBA in place. So if the police officers who are currently there don't want to participate because it's unfair to them, good riddance. That's not the type of policing that you want, right? You want police that are there to protect and serve. You want police that are there that are held to a higher standard, and not only that are held to the higher standard, that just like the people in the military, that once you understand what the UCMJ is, and you understand that you're held to a different standard, a higher standard, that's something that you want to have happen, right? We need to have the same standard, that same category, that same thing go on with the police, right? What else do we have here? We have Gospel News tells, he says, it doesn't matter if they're black or white, their mentality are the same. I agree. The training is the same. They are inadequately trained. The money that we spend on the police, I'm not saying don't spend that kind of money on the police, but what I am saying is that you don't need assault vehicles and all these other things that they make sure that the police force has. What you need is training, not just on how to identify targets and how to the best shoot somebody and how to deploy the weapons that the police has, as far as the firearms, the tasers, and all these other things. Granted, that type of training is very important. You want to know exactly how to go about doing it. You don't want another Fruitville Station type situation where you have the capture issue whether as a anyway, you don't want that type of issue coming down. What you do want is a police force that is trained in how to police. You want a police force that is there, that is integrated within the community, that knows the community, and is there to actually protect and serve. There's an old adage that when the only tool that you have is a hammer, all your issues or problems look like nails. And for many of the police force, the record shows over time that the only tool that they employ, their hammer, so to speak, is violence, not anything else as far as for de-escalation, not for moving down that threat. They view Black people, for good or bad, as individuals that are horrible people. The portrayal, our media agents are horrible, right? They always portray Black people as an extreme negative, that when you're dealing with Black people, that it is an extreme negative, something that's horrible that you're going to deal with. And how to change that, I think that you're just going to have to either abolish the current police force and stand up a new one with people who actually have the mindset that you need, with the training that's required, and understand that policing does not mean violence at all times, and that the sensitive nature that let's do this. Let's do this. So, and I'm unshare my screen. I'll come back here in a moment. But so you must not have seen the stock and where we are headed. Man, I'm gonna cover that on another day. It's probably gonna be Monday. I'm gonna talk about that, because there's looking at how everybody's talking about inflation, but all these earning calls, when you look at what they're actually doing, it's not what they're saying it is. In any event, so then there's also, you can't rule people with a soft hand. That's how they feel about it. But it has how do you compel compliance when the people are defiant, right? That's kind of the approach they look at, or how they look at it. It's all about respecting them as their authority, and if they feel slighted in the least, then that it not only precipitates, but it requires a violent response. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is that a lot of times what'll happen, and you start looking at these various dynamics between the police and our police state that we have today, where the police are constantly called on to come in and not just enforce laws, right? That they have no idea of how these laws are supposed to be enforced. I shouldn't say have no idea. The way on what they're dealing with is not enforcing laws in a way that is advantageous or beneficial towards citizenry. The way on how they prefer to enforce laws is a way in which they're able to get in there and enact violence on the citizenry, right? So again, there's a standard that we as citizens are held to that police are not. They're held to a much lower standard level. You and I, as citizens of the United States, and even there's rules that govern attorneys and judges, but those are rules. Those aren't actual laws. I would recommend that instead of having rules or rules of conduct and sanctions that can be imposed by the court and blah, 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 make laws. Like you have the UCMJ for the military, the Uniform Code of Military Justice for the military, and they're held not just to the federal laws and the state laws and possibly like two sets of state laws. They're also held to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And that's a situation wherein you start looking at it. Why are there only rules of conduct for judges or for attorneys? Why are there rules of conduct or general rules for the police, so such as they talk about the chokeholds or whatever? Those aren't laws. Those are not laws that the police are held to, right? You can't come back and say this is a law. It's just a rule. It's something that you can observe it or you don't have to, right? It's guidelines. These are some guidelines. They're not laws. The military has laws, right? Things that you and I might think are silly. Adultery is still a law in the military. You can actually be charged, get court-martialed for adultery in the military. higher, more stringent standard than what everybody else is held to, right? You can't go in there. In most states now, they've abolished those type of laws, but in the military, those type of laws still stand. And we hold the military to a higher standard, and deservedly so. I'm not saying that that standard is not deserved. I think that we don't go far enough for people. I think politicians, attorneys, uh, anybody with public trust, and doctors, judges, there should be laws, not just general rules or guidelines that you can follow. There should be laws on the books specifically at a federal and at a state and at the state levels that holds these individuals to a higher standard. That if you are elected as a judge, there's now another set of laws that applies to you. Similar to a uniform code of military justice, maybe there's a uniform code for judges, a uniform code for attorneys, a uniform code for police officers. Why not? Right? Everything else is just a guidance. Police want to sit there and choke you out, they can do that. And then they come back and you say, well, it's against the law. It's not against the law. It's against the standards they have, yes, but it's not against the law. What do we have? We have maybe you can understand the rich authority unless they put their brains on our shoulder. Okay, so there's no way you have to understand the authoritative mind. Correct, right? There's a book. I always recommend this book to everybody. It's The Dictator's Handbook. If you ever get time to read it, it's a good read. It talks about not just the trappings of power or something along those lines. What it talks about are many of the rules. And it doesn't sound like rules, but they're generic rules when you're looking at it from that perspective on once you get into power and how to keep power, how to maintain power, and the things you need to do to maintain power. And it's a really good read. It's a really, really good read if you have the opportunity to. It's called The Dictator's Handbook. I read it several years ago. Maybe 2015. I'll probably start putting up a reading list, and good books to read that help you to understand how the system works, right? Because it's extremely important to understand how the system works and what's being used against us as a citizenry and what should not be there as a citizenry in this country, right? How is the game played? And understanding that old Yasin Bey, he used to be known as Mos Def, that line that he had in on that album he had called Black on Both Sides, and the song was Mr. Nigga, where he said they say they want you successful, but then they make it stressful. You start keeping up the pace, they start changing up the tempo. That's part of the rule, right? That's one of those rules they're going to have, that as you start keeping pace, as you get there, like with what they did in Tulsa, they're going to change up the rules just ever so slightly. In football, every year they change up the rules slightly. Hockey, they do the same thing, right? They want more offense, they're going to tweak it just so that they get exactly the results they're looking for. And so the politicians, that's what's going to happen. They're going to tweak the rules ever so slightly once you start keeping up the pace. It says we moved out to police state. Is this not what you're looking at? Yeah, we are, from my opinion, and this is strictly an opinion here at Gospel News, is that we are in a police state, right? This is something where we come we don't like to call it a fascist state, but it's moving more and more towards that direction. And it's interesting because now it doesn't matter whether it's liberal or conservative, they keep on moving closer and closer towards fascism. And you're realizing, or you start to recognize, it doesn't matter what the titles are that the people are having. What does matter are the policies that you're watching that they're enforcing. What does matter is that when you start watching what it is they're doing, that these are things that they're doing that are definitely impacting us in an extremely negative way. It says fear to rule the people. Yeah, well, that's par for the course, right? Again, I recommend The Dictator's Handbook. It is a really good read. It does outline a lot of those tactics and which tactics are preferred in order to get those results. It talks about the various systems, right? So we have democratic, republics, monarchies, dictatorships, all of these things that it talks about. And then not only where that's at, but how do you get the results that you're looking for out of those systems? So, and I said that, and now I just realized as I came off, I was going to sit there and give you guys an anecdote. I just forgot the anecdote I was going to give you. Headed to the NWO. And you're not talking about the one on WCW wrestling. No, I get New World Order. Got you. But yeah, it definitely looks like where we're at this point. It's really important to understand, and this is why I'm changing the name of this live stream up. This is going to be what you're going to do about it podcast, because a lot of times we especially we as Black people specifically is what I'm talking about here. We're really good at defining an issue, right? We can look at something and we can do what they call thin slicing. We can say, hey, that's racist. And we can outline, maybe we might not know exactly what it is about it that's racist, but we can outline what those situations are that's racist. But then the next step of coming up with solutions for it, coming up with a plan of action, and then executing that plan of action. It might not be the most comfortable thing in the world that you're going to do. So back in the day, one of the things that they did, and that I would highly recommend looking at as a model, is it normal, would be a question, when you look at something like the nonviolent civil rights movement, right? That aspect of it that was led by King and those guys there, because you also had Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam, NOI, and then you also had the Black Panthers, and then you also had Kwame Ture, who was at Stokely Carmichael at the time, and the Southern, the SNCC, and what they were doing. But there was a nonviolent aspect of it within King's movement. And I'm not arguing, because one of the things that the other aspect that we start to fight about are tactics. The strategy, or what you can look at as a goal, that's for the upliftment or building up of Black people. It's where we should be at. We should all have that. If the group has that same strategy, I'm not arguing with you about tactics. Each group can have a different set of tactics. So long as the goal or strategy that you're striving for is the same strategy of uplifting and getting Black people where we need to be, right? So the tactics you use, whether it's nonviolent, whether it's as a following police, whatever that strategy is that group or that, as Black people working together, we shouldn't be arguing about tactics. We should be arguing if the strategy is not there. So anyway, so the point I was making is that you can have a situation wherein, and this is what this is what should be there with the police force. Being nonviolent, that's not normal, right? Nonviolence is not normal, right? If someone assaults you physically, if someone verbally comes after you, it's not normal to just want to be passive and not strike back, whether verbally or physically. That's not normal. When they did the sit-ins, because one of the things that I always say, we whitewash history. What King and them were talking about, what in their nonviolence was, it was nonviolent direct action. Everybody always removes direct action. We whitewash it. We want to give a sanitized version of what it was that King and them were doing, and we just they reduce it down to just nonviolence. But it was nonviolence direct action. There were boycotts, like the Montgomery bus boycott, that they were instrumental in, that they made sure that happened. And there were sit-ins, which is something, not just the marches. Everybody likes to focus on the marches, but the sit-ins were also something that happened. And when you go back, and I need to pull up some video on it. I need to find some of the video, and I'll show you guys here. But when you go back and you look at what they did during that time frame for sit-ins, they didn't just go sit in at a lunch counter, right? Because they were going to be assaulted when they get there. They had white people that were going to call them nigger all day long. They had people that were going to assault them while they were there. And so what they did in anticipation and leading up to it was they practiced. They practiced being insulted. They practiced being assaulted. They practiced what would they do and how would they remain calm, cool and collected, something that is extremely against the norm of what you want to do when someone strikes you. Someone strikes you, you want to strike back. That's natural. Someone spits on you, you want to spit back. Excuse me. Someone says something to you, you want to say something back. But they practice not doing that, doing something that was completely abnormal. They practiced on it. Do the police practice on de-escalating a situation? Or do they practice on how to use their assault weapons? Do the police practice on someone insulting them in their manhood? Or do they practice on how to go in there and go shoot somebody? Right? Let me get some comments in here before you guys see that. You guys, no food. What's next? I agree with that. What's the act? What is the plan of action or plan of escape? That has a, let's talk as a, I'm going to come back to you on that one. Gospel news. Let's see. We have okay, another one of those. This generation is done with these kumbaya and prayer meetings. I agree. I say I'm not with. I say, depending on what it is you're trying to do, that there's a place for it and there's not a place for it. I always call it that when you're dealing with that type of situation, you have it. I call it it's a bad dating app. What do you call it? You go on a dating app. It's a bad dating app profile. That's what's going on right now. People get in there. It's like, I don't know. I think that I like to get together with friends and I like to go on long walks. I like arts and crafts, making signs and things like that, and expressing myself and getting and all that stuff out. Not that any change really needs to happen, but it'd be nice. That's a bad dating strategy. I mean, that your profile is what you're looking at, and that's not something that's always going to be advantageous. There's a time and a place for it, not necessarily always. Let's see. Diane Taylor says, I agree. I love animal kingdom programs, and the animals, when they are under attack, attempt to defend themselves. That is exactly right. That is exactly right. That is the normal thing. He says, if we get hit, we will hit back. I say, here's the thing. When people, I always hear people say these type of things, and this is where I kind of push back on that. Train. The same way that they trained back in the day, right? They trained for if they got hit, how not to hit. You don't sit there and take a soldier and you just toss him out there in the battlefield. You send him through boot camp. Then you send him through A school. You send him through all these different types of training, right? To learn how to do a job that's going to require them to strike back. How best to do it. The police, when they went there and they shot this individual at his home, right? He went down there with the thought process of not policing, but he's going to attack. There's an assault that's underway. How do I go about it? Okay, we might need long distance, right? This is one of the things they talked about. So we don't need pistols. What we want an assault rifle. So they made sure they had assault rifles because the driveway was long. They looked at the terrain. They looked at where they were going into it. They made sure that they were going into it from a very tactical standpoint. They went down the driveway. Okay, we need to split up. We're going to go at the front door, and just in case they break out the back door, we're going to get them at the back door. Think about the thought process here, right? When they're walking into it, they're not walking into it on we're going to de-escalate and we need to see how we're going to handle domestic violence. That was not the thought process. They're walking into it like this is a military engagement that they're getting ready to get into. They get down there. Okay, so now we get to the front door. I don't knock on the front door because maybe they might shoot back, right? The viewpoint the police have right now is one where they are under attack. Not that they have a citizenry in there. No, this is okay. There's domestic violence. I've seen domestic violence go wrong. Is that the norm? No, that's not the norm. However, I'm going to assume the worst case scenario when I walk up here, and I'm going to treat it like the worst case scenario. And then they get up there and he hunches down at the door, makes a low profile so that it's a smaller target to hit if he does get shot at, right? Because he's in what they call the fatal funnel. Doors, there's a 3-foot span on at a door where we call it the fatal funnel, where it's referred to as a fatal funnel, right? And you want to make sure that you get out of the way of the fatal funnel as quickly as possible. So he's at the fatal funnel. He's probably, and 9 times out of 10, he's in his mind right now. He's thinking tactically, as in this is an assault case. This is a case where I'm going to need to defend myself. This is something where there's already been gunfire that has been reported. that the 911 caller called in, and we're going to need, as in, even though I called them again and I realized now that the data that we had, and now that we're on the ground, that that's different, my mentality is still the same. The mentality is still, I'm going to kill somebody. I'm coming in hot. The point I'm making is the same way that they have that type of training. A lot of times we just feel that if you just get a gun, that's enough. That's not enough. It's one of the major issues I have when people start talking about by any means, but then they don't, like the Nation of Islam, this by any means, and they train. If you're not going to train, if you're not going to know how your weapon works, if you're not going to know what the strategy and tactics are that you're going in with, then why are you sitting there talking about, I just need a gun, I just need to strike back? How are you going to strike back? If you're going to do it non-violently, how are you going to do that? What is the goal and the outcome that you're looking for? How do you achieve that? If you recognize that the system is, for all intents and purposes, it's not broken because it's working exactly as it's supposed to, right? For it to be broken, it has to not work as intended. It works as intended, so it's not broken. But in order for you to combat all the flaws that you see in the system, you need to be able to address what they are. You need to come up with a plan of action. And once you come up with that plan of action, then you need to execute on that plan of action. And we as Black people, we stop at that first phase. Right? So what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, when they all went and got their weapons? No, they weren't ready for them to get bombed. They weren't ready for the assault that the white people put on them. When they went in there, they wanted to defend that young Black boy from the assault that was getting ready to happen to him, that lynch mob that was forming because this white woman makes an accusation against him. Right? So if we as Black people are sincere, if we honestly want to talk about you're going to use violence as one of your methodologies, I'm not advocating any methodology here. I'm not advocating any of that. But what I am saying is that whatever it is that you're going to do, practice and train at it. Don't go out there and getting young Black boys killed and just telling everybody just to be emotional and just go out there and strike back. Be like an animal. And I agree with you. Animals do it. It's the normal, natural inclination. That is normal. The way that you feel, that is a normal thing for you to feel angry, for you to feel pain or hurt when you see these things happening in the community or amongst us, and you see the Black community suffering. That is normal that you want to do something. But what are you going to do? Right? What are we going to do? I talked the other day about sometimes you just got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Why? Because the way on how we get trapped in on this is that they'll make it so it's comfortable for you. Yeah, that happened to them. What didn't happen to you? Yeah. But isn't this nice? Isn't this nice? This is nicer, right? Don't you like what's going on for you now in the US? Hey, look, at one point, yes, you're niggers, but you're not undocumented. You're not like those illegal aliens, right? Yeah, okay, so you're poor, but you're not a nigger. You're not white, so you should be okay, right? Don't work with those niggers over there. Oh no, don't do that. Or they look at it and they make sure the divisions are there. And we keep falling for it where we keep on dividing ourselves. We start fighting over tactics. Don't fight over tactics. If your brother has one set of tactics that he wants to utilize, that's your brother. I said, you don't have to agree with those tactics that they're utilizing. Acknowledge that it's going to be a different set and that's not what you're utilizing. Maybe you might want to try it from a more legal standpoint, right? And they get to make a choice on how it is they want to address this situation, right? There needs to be uniformity. There needs to be unity within the community. And we need to get back to that. NFAC, I'll be honest with you, I don't know what NFAC is. Maybe you explain it down here. Beautiful group. Okay, I'm going to have to look into it. I will definitely look into the NFAC group. But if there's anything that has again, I'm not recommending any course of action right now. What I will say as far as the course of action that I will recommend is that anything that you get ready to do, that you research it, that you do training on it, whether it's nonviolent or whether it is the other way. Or so if you're going to protect yourself, what are the rules? What are the laws out on guns? On possessing a weapon? Are you able to do it in a way that doesn't put the group at any kind of significant disadvantage? Do you know how to utilize a weapon and when you would utilize it? Right? Just having them is not enough. You look at what happened with the Black Panther Party. Just having weapons wasn't enough. Right? Understanding that they're going to be putting moles, or they're going to change up the tempo. As soon as you start keeping pace, they're going to change up that tempo every single time. It's happened throughout history. You want to know how they're going to do it, you just have to sit there and just look at what happened throughout history. The playbook hasn't changed, right? They still run the same plays. Haven't seen it in a while, but they'll run it again at some point, right? You might not have seen that particular trick play, but it's there. It's in the playbook. They know how to run that end around. They know how to run a flea flicker. They know how to run these things. It doesn't get pulled out often. But when they do, they know how to run it and how to keep it within the rules of the game that they have established. All right. And that's at the local level. If you start talking about at a larger level, then that's a whole other discussion. I'll talk about that another time. It's one of the things that I always tell people on why it is we don't have a United States of Africa. I'm going to touch on it briefly here. I'm not going to go into it in depth right now, but what I will say is go back and look at who are the permanent members on the UN Security Council and what do they have in common, right? So you can look at what do they have in common, and I can give you a hint on it. I'm not going to give it to you today. I'm going to tell you what as but there's a reason why certain voices nationally or internationally are heard and others are not. There's a reason where that unity, and they make sure that they keep it so that you're disunit or not united, that you're disjointed. They do that on purpose. And I say they, I mean the political and the corporate giants and moguls, that they do that on purpose, right? The understanding of the financial system. All of the things that we need to sit there and really start considering. And again, just going back and looking at the Supreme Court opinion, or not Supreme Court, the 11th Circuit Court of their opinion. And they even gave their analysis here. Let me share this real fast. Because they give you the standard that they and how they did their mental gymnastics here to justify killing this citizen in his own home, right? So it says we review de novo, meaning new. They took it as a de novo case, something that they're going to look at it brand new, without it, like as if it's without any of the other stuff that goes with it. It says we review de novo a grant of summary judgment based on qualified immunity, construing the facts and drawing all inferences in the light most favorable to the non-moving party, right? So the party who didn't bring the motion, they're looking at the qualified immunity in the light best against the police officer in this particular situation, right? So looking at things most favorably for him, that's the way they're going to look at it. And they're going to look at it brand new. Reap and sow is catching them right now. They have forgotten that God is still on the throne. They'll catch it at some point. Right now, they're still doing the thing that they're doing. I say that, but it says qualified immunity, and this is something that's, because this is their analysis. This is the court's analysis. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. This is their analysis. It says the qualified immunity doctrine protects an officer unless, at the time of the officer's supposedly wrongful act, the law was already established to such a high degree that every objectively reasonable officer in his place would be on notice that what he was doing was clearly unlawful given the circumstances. Again, the standard for you is there doesn't have to be something that gives a high degree that the average citizen would know that this was unlawful, right? For a citizen to be able to use as a defense a legal mistake. But for an officer, that's the case. It says the doctrine protects all but the plainly incompetent or one who is knowingly violating the federal law. For qualified immunity to apply, an officer must first establish that he acted within his discretionary authority, and it gives all these Terrell and Smith and Morton and Kirkwood, and the numbers. These are cases. This is the actual case law, and this one came from the 11th Circuit. This is also from the 11th Circuit. This was case that happened in 2012, case that was decided in 2013. That would be just understanding how to read that information. Anyway, once the officer does that, the burden shifts to the plaintiffs to show that the qualified immunity is not appropriate. So basically, long story short, the moment you say, oh, that what they did was wrong and they should have known that was illegal and wrong in what they did. They say they have to know to such a high degree. There has to be they have to know the law to such a degree that any reasonable officer would also know that. And it has to be plainly stated those exact set of circumstances. And again, if you're not allowing it, how is there going to be another exact set of circumstances? You're tossing them out. They get qualified immunity. There'll never be a circumstance. But let me show this one other thing. Okay. To overcome a qualified immunity defense where the defendant acted within his discretionary authority, the plaintiff must show that the defendant's actions not only violated one or more constitutional rights, but that it was clearly established at the time that those specific actions did so. And then it gives a 3-point test or criteria. It talks about plaintiffs can meet the clearly established requirements by one of 3 ways. 1, by pointing to a materially similar decision of the Supreme Court of this court or the Supreme Court of the state of which the case arose, right? But if you're tossing all of them out, you're never going to get a specific case like that, right? Because they get qualified immunity every time something that might look like, well, then they all get tossed out. Then by establishing that a broader, clearly established principle should control over the novel facts of the case. So if there was one bought before, but let's say in this particular one, they're saying this is brand new, and it should show that what they did was wrong and against the law. And then number 3, by convincing us that the case is one of those rare ones that fits within the exception of conduct, which so obviously violates the Constitution that prior case law is unnecessary. And again, it points to another case from this 11th Circuit. So, and it talks about under the first and second, they're pretty much agreeing that the first and second criteria is not what they're leaning on. They're leaning on the third, that it's so obvious that they violated the constitutional requirement to announce the officer there. And then this is all the court's analysis on what they relied on in order to come to the decision, or in this opinion that they came to, right? So again, I can't overstate it enough that understanding how they're going about these things and the reason that they're using and how they're giving what we call outcome determinate judgment. They know where they want what they want the decision to be, and they're going to jump through hoops to make sure that they hold it to that, as if they get that judgment. Let's see. That's the catch 22 as you are showing. Okay. With that couple, yeah. And then this will and is affecting black and white. I agree. I say, and the reason why I covered it, normally I try to just cover things that are in the news specifically for black people on this channel when I talk about things, but this is one of those situations where understanding what the rules are, and as they're changing the rules, understanding what those changing rules are and how it is that they keep that they make it so that it is now legal. They've now codified it. They put it into legal law that the next time someone comes in and says, "Hey, I don't have," the police officer not just no knock warrants. We talked about that with the Mir case that just happened here in this month as well. But looking at it from the standpoint of, even if I don't have a warrant, if I just got a call out to your house and I get out there to your home, and while I'm there at your house, it says they drove up without the lights on, so no blue and reds coming on up. I get out the vehicle quietly. We get our assault weapons out. We come down in the dark to your home because all the lights are off because you guys are in the house sleeping. We don't knock, we don't ring, we don't announce ourselves as the police, that we're there lawfully and legally. And then when you come out thinking that you have a burglar or a prowler out there, and as a man of the house, you're there trying to protect your home, we dump 3 in your chest. Oops, sorry, my bad. There's no law that says that what I just did was wrong. Not that I sat there, came up to your door, seeing it was dark, made a small profile, heard you coming around the corner with your weapon in hand that's down on the ground. And then when you see me, instead of me going, "Oh, that's possibly the homeowner," and saying, "Stop, police," I dump three in your chest the moment you start raising your gun because you see a burglar or a prowler at your front door, no lights, nothing on, in your dark blue uniform in the dark against my door. And let's say we flip that. Let's say we flip the circumstances around because there's an officer at the back door also. Let's just say we flip the circumstances around, and the homeowner comes on up. He comes there, and the police officer actually wasn't paying attention. Let's just say that. Let's say the police officer wasn't paying attention, and let's say that he doesn't announce himself the way that all the same facts are in play. And I'm going to switch up this fact pattern slightly. This is changing facts of what's actually happened. And let's say that the homeowner actually shot the police officer. Do you think the homeowner would have any kind of defense against the police in a situation like that? If the other police officer comes up and sees his partner just got shot and he doesn't announce himself and he gets shot, do you think that the prosecutor is going to let that ride and say, well, hey, how is that when you seen him come across and he ran past the garage where the lights were on and your wife had just ran back inside when you shot the police officer at the door? Did you not know that the guy, did you not now know that he was a police officer? And now that you shot his partner also, did you not realize that the person that you just shot, the partner, is also a police officer? Do you see the standard that they're going to hold the citizenry to, but that they're not going to hold the police to? The police get held to a lower standard. And it's one of the things I want, I say, if you don't take away anything else from what we're talking about today, understand that when we're talking about the police in this country, the standard that you and I, as citizens, get held to is different than the standard legally that the police get held to. Qualified immunity is a doctrine in the courts that the courts get to hold up as judicial law every time a police officer comes in. Now, they can, if a police officer violates, say, choke somebody out and their chokehold in the precinct is not allowed, they can get away with that. And they can sit up there and say, well, that's not a bright line rule. That is not a law. That is just a general guidance. That's what they're alluding to, that you could use to understand how that should work, but that's not the rule. However, if the police do it, or if it's something that's legal, they can hold you to that, right? Killing the police, there's no such thing as lawfully resisting arrest. There's no such thing as a lawful resisting of arrest. Right? So that being said, let me just read this last one. I'm gonna let you guys go. I just realized I've been talking for a hot minute here. I'm trying to keep these under 2 hours, but hopefully next week I'm gonna give you guys a heads up. I want to have an in-studio guest here who is an attorney. I want to start putting a spotlight, talking about what are we going to do about it. I want to start spotlighting Black business, right? If you know of any Black business that you want to have spotlighted, let me know. There's several of them out there that I am now targeting that I want to bring them on, either in person in the studio or online, that I want to bring these Black businesses on, and I want to spotlight Black business, Black excellence. I want to start getting into the point that we start patronizing ourselves, right? And that we start loving ourselves, right? That would be one of the things that we can do. So identifying the issue, we don't have enough Black business. What can we do in order to address it? One of the things that we can do, we can start spotlighting it. And one of the other things that it'll come up, as you guys are getting a little primer for what's coming up. But as we're doing it, one of the things I want to start encouraging us to do as a people is put the peer pressure on us in a good way. What do I mean by that? I mean this, that when you talk to someone, it's like we live in this consumer culture, and that's not something I advocate, is to just buy wholesale into consumer culture. But if you're going to participate in it, let's ask the questions for each other. In the past week, if you bought something, if you purchased anything, you made any kind of consumer purchases, how many of those, or what's the percentage, which businesses that were Black businesses that you actually patronized? Let's ask the question for each other, right? How much money did you spend within Black businesses? If you're a Black business, how much money do you spend on your vendors being Black? Right? Is that where we're putting our money at? Are we trying to keep the money within the community? Are we trying to make ourselves strong? They're going to push against us, and the reason why I bring that up, and it's going to come up in next week because I want to talk about some things when it comes to finance, but spending power. And I was talked about it. I alluded to it a little bit in dealing with black men and black women, and how black women, women in general, but black women from financially prop up this commercial system that we have. You guys are the largest consumers in this system that we have, right? And so you're looking at it from that perspective, obviously there's a good reason on why it is they want to keep us separate. But that was one of the things I was looking at. But looking at the amount of money that we actually put into the system, why don't we start putting that money within our own communities? Everybody else recognizes it. Everybody else comes into the black community. They even start putting in things where there's high taxes on it, like liquor stores and churches, right? That's where you get all that. Both of them are about it as advantageous as the other. So as we're looking at it, as we're considering it, which black businesses are you patronizing? I'm gonna start putting a list of black businesses that I patronize on a regular basis, put that up there. And then also, are we keeping our money within our community? Right? And it's not, and that's not saying, and this is, let me be clear on this. This course of action is not intended by any stretch of the imagination, by any means, is it intended to be derogatory or degrading towards other communities or other people, or to be hateful towards other communities or other people. Other ethnic enclaves, they're doing this already. This is not nothing new. And for us to do it is not nothing new or something that's going to be extraordinary, right? But it does help us as black people to start getting on our own feet, right? We don't have bootstraps to pull ourselves up by, but what we do have, we need to start utilizing to the best of our ability. And stop always giving away our resources to everybody else. We need to start making sure that we have our own resources in our own community. And that's where we need to be at. And that's what I want to make sure that we start looking at, and we start putting the pressure on each other, right? Can we support each other? Let's put the pressure on. Let's be nice. Let's not just go into business just so you can be the boss. Let's go into business so that we can offer services and products to each other, right? Not that you should be happy that you come and I'll let you in my business, but I'm happy to have you in here, brother. I'm happy to have you in here, sister. Look, I got some services. If I need to undercut these white guys or sometimes it's going to cost a little more because right now I'm not at that level. But but I appreciate the business that you're bringing me, right? And seeing as we working together how we can make our community stronger. Those are just some little things that we can do. Understanding how the game and what they're doing against us, and I really do at this point. I'm going to close it out at this point. And I don't have anything inspirational I want to leave you with today. I know it's Black History Month, the shortest month, and I don't have anything that's going against the whitewash narrative today. I had one that I was going to play for you from Geronimo Pratt. He's one of the people in the Black Panther Party I really looked up to, and I was going to play an excerpt from something that he stated. However, it was copyright, so I didn't pull that down. So I'm not going to sit there and infringe on that. And I guess we could talk about fair use, but I'm not going to sit there and play with that right now. But in any event, in case I did not tell you before, I love you, care about you, hoping that everything is going great for you and that you're having a great day. And that even if you are having a great day, even if you're killing it, I want you to also know, and what I want you to also have in your life right now, that God may bless you with it always. Always have peace in your life. And with that, we are out, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.